Hello, it's Philip Taylor speaking from Richmond Green Chambers in London, and today I'm reviewing a book about a man I met. It's an interesting book. Unfortunately, he's now passed on, but the book is called The Unexpected Scalia, a Conservative Justice's Liberal Opinions, and it's been written by a friend of his called David M Dorsen and been published by the Cambridge University Press. Do have a look at our reviews on the web and in the journals. Elizabeth and I talked about this book, and I've been the lead writer on this one. I've given it the title Clear and Crisp, with the biographical gravitas expected of such an important legal figure who wasn't really a liberal. And I say that guardedly, because this book is a very special book for me, because I had the privilege, and my wife had the privilege, of meeting Scalia and his wife, Maureen. There's the book itself. That's the spine, you can see there. Then there's some blurb on the back. I bought a little bit of the blurb just to put it into the review, but it's a very good review, a book. It's a good review. Well, there is the detail about David, the author, and then the front of it, you've got some basic information about Scalia himself, then some information there about the book, and then a nice picture of him in younger days. I remember him very much in the front of the book here, but that's in younger days, because his career spanned a very long period of time. I'm not going to give away a lot of secrets for this book. You want to read it yourself. There's the information from CUP, and then there is a dedication, which I will just show you there. And then after that we get to the contents, and you can see the structure. What is a liberal? And he's very conscious that of Scalia as a liberal, and because the word liberal has a different meaning, of course, in America, really, from what it does here. But he starts off with what is a liberal, and he looks at Scalia's life in the various parts and chapters, and it runs all the way through. So it's a very detailed work. Then there's a preface, which is also always worth reading, because you get some idea as to where the author is coming from. Then you have acknowledgements, then you have the question posed, what is a liberal, and then lots of justification. It's a wordy document, if I can put it that way, as to be expected. Quite a lot of American publications of a legal bent do tend to have a lot of words in them, but it's not difficult to read. There we go. Now it starts off Scalia's judicial philosophy, the confirmation hearings, and then it runs all the way through. And as I say, I'm not going to give a blow-by-blow account of what's in the book. The index at the back is by page numbering, and again it's quite a detailed index. Then after that you've got the tables of cases that he decided, which is always very interesting, and then the various footnotes which are at the back. There are footnotes. Obviously the appendices are fairly substantial. They take up that part of the book towards the end, so almost a third of the book is on appendices of various sorts, justices who served with him, all sorts of information, plus the notes. And as I say, there's a conclusion part at the end of it on page 242. The total number of pages runs to just under 400 in total. It's a lovely book, and I was really delighted, A, when I saw it, and B, when CUP very kindly sent it to me for a review, and I'm hoping the review will be in some of the journals as well as on the web. So what do we say? That it's a particularly fascinating insight into the life of an important legal figure in the United States of America, Antonin Scalia. We were privileged to meet Scalia and his wife Maureen in London not long before his death, when he died in 2016, and I'm recording this in the autumn of 2017. And one never forgets, of course, meeting certain people, and we shall certainly remember our encounter with Scalia as a man as well as in his position, because he was a serving justice when we met him, as basically an enduring and substantial figure in American jurisprudence. And I think that legacy is quite clearly going to be with us, because I've met a lot of what I've described as well-known, highly respected jurists, and he is amongst the top rank. Not necessarily because of his views, but probably also because he was there a long time and he made a lot of decisions, like Denning and a whole load of other people that you can name them, and they were all very important people. Bingham, Wolfe, a whole group of people in various different decades. And of course my decade's spread 50 years now, so it's a long time ago when I first started this business. It's very clear that when Antonin Scalia was one of the most important, outspoken and controversial justices in the past century, that statement is made quite clearly, not as an understatement at all, because it's a statement of fact. And this touching and detailed biography is, I think, long overdue, because David Dorsen's meticulous work describes Scalia's endorsement of originalism. Now let me just deal with that for those of you who are not familiar with it, because I'm going to talk a little bit about jurisprudence as well. Because originalism, that means a requirement to decide cases as they would have been decided in 1789. Then there's textualism, which limits judges in what they could consider when interpreting text, thus causing major changes in the way the Supreme Court decides cases. It's an interesting approach. Whether it's right or wrong, I'm not here to discuss, but I do think it's important to know that that's the method that was being used. And Dorsen's description of what is a liberal right at the beginning is, because it's contained in the introduction, a most useful statement, although readers will of course arrive at their own opinions. Of course a number of Scalia's views are not shared by that many people in the United Kingdom. He's described by Dorsen in the following way: as a leader in opposing abortion, the right to die, affirmative action, mandated equality for gays and lesbians, and was virtually untrammelled, was in favour for virtually untrammelled gun rights, political expenditures, and the imposition of the death penalty. In fact, quite an exhaustive list of all the most controversial issues of our contemporary times, and of course not at all liberal in any way. And today, in a fast-moving change, we have the millennials coming up, people born in the 21st century, who have very different views. So we are seeing very substantial change even now. I wouldn't call him a troglodyte in any way, shape or form, but you can see that those views, which are very, very strongly held views in the States, are views which are possibly changing. Not, of course, with the current incumbent in the White House, Donald Trump. Now, what we found refreshing is that Scalia often followed where his doctrine would take him, leading him to write many liberal opinions. That's according to the biographer Dorsen. The key to Scalia's approach is why did he write so many liberal opinions? His answer was that his legal philosophy compelled him to do so. Otherwise, as he said, he would have been inconsistent or worse. And that, of course, is the answer in the book. Now, as a close friend of Scalia, Dorsen is placed in a very strong position, we think, to explain what he described, quote, as the flawed judicial philosophy of one of the most important Supreme Court justices of the past century. That's certainly what he was, and there were flaws. There he is again. But he made his decisions, and he was quite clear about the direction he was going. That was the man when you met him. That's what you saw and what you got. It does not, of course, depend on your own point of view as to where you go with your review or consideration of him. But it's why this biography, I think, because it's trying to explain his approach, why this biography then is such an important publication on both sides of the Atlantic. And as I say, it was a privilege to meet him. Often one has some anecdotes which are quite personal when meeting the opinion formers and deciders of our time, the famous people, the elite, whatever you want to call them. Scalia was no exception. We're not expecting to like him very much, but we found him charming. He certainly was a very pleasant individual and didn't agree with an awful lot of his views, but there again, he was a perfectly pleasant man. I didn't find a side to him in that sense. And as with all biographies, it's so useful to read about important figures like Scalia because there's so much that one finds out. Also because of what they've done, the decision-making powers that they've had, which really leads me to the question I asked him, and I couldn't resist it. Was on American realism. What I said, did you have for breakfast this morning? And he came back very quickly to boiled eggs, he said. I replied. And his wife enthusiastically agreed, saying, and they were very nice. They know where we're coming from with that one. And as you can guess, he was charming throughout, and knew exactly why I had asked the question. I wondered how often he'd been asked that one before, but I didn't get an answer, and I wasn't expecting one. Now, obviously, I'm so glad to see that American realism then is alive and well. I'm afraid I'm a little bit cynical about that, but of course, depending on what their dietary requirements are, they may well have a little sort of disagreement and be tetchy some mornings. But, you can see the view because we're all human beings. Of course, with American realism, we do know what judges have for their breakfast, and that in this case, it doesn't cloud their judicial thinking. I didn't think it would, personally. But however, it depends on your point of view. Like the editor or the presenter on Radio 4 who likes his porridge in a certain way. It's the same sort of thing, really. So thank you to Dorsen. It was a privilege to meet Scalia, and I liked him as a very interesting man to talk to. We didn't agree with all his views, but we have lost in his passing a towering American legal figure. But we do have, of course, the excellent biography from David Dorsen to remember him by. And the book was published on the 2nd of February 2017, which was sort of a year after he died. Here's the book again. Nice book. I was very pleased. I'm so pleased that Cambridge University Press have actually published this book. Let's just open it. This is the later part of his life, the finale part, where he's looking at decisions in the later years, the other originalist justice, and then all of the business. These are votes that took place, so there's a huge amount of detail, and the notes as well. And then, as I say, a very, very interesting book. The notes you will find at the back, so they're not actually underneath as little footnotes, but altogether a good book, and for me now a memory of what happened. But thank you very much to everybody concerned for this most important work. Bye bye.